I want to talk about the different potential combination of options you might be considering when building your bootstrapped SaaS business, and what that may ultimately mean for you in terms of your chances of being as successful as you'd like to be in the end. So, from a background perspective, I've built or tried to build, for the most part, almost any different type of SaaS business imaginable. But for this content, I'm going to focus on a couple of key ones. There's some I'm going to recommend, and there's others that I'm not. And I'm going to be specific with the details about why for each. And there's four that I'm going to cover. It's going to cover everything from B2B, B2C, and then others as well too that kind of lump into a separate category that I think is just fraught with all types of challenges, making your life infinitely harder. And as such, I'm not going to recommend you approach those. Okay, so the first one that I want to talk about is B2C, right? And these acronyms, what they stand for is the B is business and the C is consumer. And in this case, B2C means you, the business, the SaaS business, are selling to C, the consumer. So whatever it is, and there's a couple of examples I've talked about recently, but my podcast show notes tool sells directly to consumers in some instances. There's been other examples I've shared as well too. Somebody built an AI tool to help people with fighting speeding tickets. So that business is selling to the C consumer, people that are getting speeding tickets and want help fighting that and getting rid of the points or reducing the fines or whatever. I mentioned another based on a personal experience I've had as well, and what I think is also a problem worth solving, for which I've recently come upon the fact that there are people out there trying to bring products like that to market, making it even more obvious that that's definitely a problem worth solving. That is helping consumers fight health insurance when they're denying their claims, which is something I've been through myself personally. But just another example, right? These are all B2C type approaches to building a SaaS business. And again, the B in this case would be you building the SaaS business. The C would be the consumer that you're selling to. So that's the first one. And that is one that I would potentially recommend you considering if you've got a decent problem worth solving or an idea that you'd like to pursue there. I've done it myself with varying degrees of success. The second one, and this one is my favorite approach to take here, and this is the one I would strongly recommend you consider above all else in terms of these combinations. And this one is B2B. As you can imagine, both of the B's in this case, they both refer to businesses. So you, the SaaS business, are selling to another business, right? But it depends on whatever that target market might be. I built tools from everything for marketing agencies to law firms, basically, right? And in each of those instances, both of those are other businesses. So me building the SaaS product business, I'm selling to that marketing agency or I'm selling to that law firm, whatever. One of the things, a number of the things that I really find that helps bootstrap, in particular bootstrap SaaS founders when they're trying to consider which of these approaches to take, some of the advantages when you're looking to sell to businesses are may or may not be relatively obvious to you. But there can be a lot more consistency when it comes to businesses as opposed to consumers. So the advantage would be B2B over taking a B2C approach or building a B2C SaaS product in this case. But their problems, their challenges, their processes, their bottlenecks, the budgets they have available, a lot of these things are not just more consistent, but they are made available. Businesses are in business to stay in business, right? So they need their problems and challenges solved. Otherwise, it's going to be bad news for them. So they're out there already likely looking for solutions to, and I'm assuming in this case you found a decent problem we're solving for one of those businesses. But all of those reasons, it will aid you in the potential to kind of build, scale, and be successful ultimately in building your SaaS business. So that's why I like B2B the most. Third category. This one, I'm going to lump a few into it. And I'm going to call two out by name, and I don't recommend either of these. I've been involved in either of these. I've tried to help coach folks through wanting to build businesses like these, and they just have so many challenges. It's very, very difficult to overcome and be successful with them. I'm not saying you can't be successful trying to build a SaaS business in one of these ways, but especially if you want to do so in a bootstrapped way, I think the odds are likely against you, especially when considering the other two and the advantages that they have. The ones that I'm going to mention by name are building a marketplace, which means you need to bring together, for example, buyers and sellers. That could be very difficult because you have that chicken and egg problem, right? If you can't get buyers, how do you get sellers? Can't get sellers, how do you get buyers? Or dating apps, maybe an example of something like that. Very competitive space, very difficult to differentiate yourself, very difficult to kind of get off the ground because you kind of need both. But it isn't always easy to design a marketplace that's got a relatively straightforward value proposition for both sides of that marketplace and to get them to come to you, especially paying for a solution. You often have to kind of like give it away to one for free, try to attract them, and then becomes a race condition to try to get the other side as well too. So it's fraught with a ton of additional complexity, and nobody needs additional complexity or challenges when they're trying to build, grow, and scale a SaaS product business, especially if you're bootstrapped. So that's one of the big reasons why I don't like marketplaces. The other, this one may be more transparent or more straightforward as well also, but it's building social media applications. I know there's a ton out there that we're all very familiar with that have been very successful in your, Facebooks and Instagrams and Pinterests and whatever, basically TikToks, etc. So yes, a lot of those applications have been built and scaled to ridiculous levels. However, we are seeing the aftermath of that just battle to try to control those spaces, and we're only seeing the very, very few that have ultimately survived that fierce competitive landscape. There's been a ton. There's been way more that have attempted to kind of capture that market space that ultimately never went anywhere. And one of the reasons why I don't like these plays is, again, a lot of the same type of challenges that you have with the marketplace, but in my opinion, these are even harder, right? And they're particularly difficult to monetize. They also have these obscure kind of business models in terms of how they charge. And a lot of people, when they want to do this, they'll say something, well, I'll just sell ads or something like that. And it's like, yeah, I understand, right? That makes sense logically, but the amount of traction that you need with a social media application to actually sell ads and produce any meaningful revenue is dramatic. So one of the biggest reasons why I don't like or recommend folks building new social media applications these days is because there are massive cash, like they suck a ton of cash. If you go back and look at the examples that I gave, the Instagrams, the Pinterest, the Facebooks, whatever of the world, they have required millions and millions of dollars in funding to kind of get to where they were. And it still wasn't necessarily straightforward in terms of like they were always going to be successful. They ebbed and flowed for a while before a number of them were even successful and became what they are today. So especially if you're considering bootstrapping, that's the content I create for. That's what I'm doing with all of my SaaS applications. Those are in a completely different direction and not one that I'd recommend you go in. Instead, get pretty much the exact opposite of that. Consider one of these B2C or maybe even better B2B spaces where you can find, specific problems we're solving that exist consistently across that target market, right? Whether you go in the C or the B space, and then interact with them, niche down as far as you can, right? Leverage AI and things like that to bring the products to market as quickly as you can. And then relatively quickly, at least on a small economic scale, you should be able to make some interesting looking numbers that probably would scale pretty well if you can reach that from a profitability perspective. So, okay, so how do you apply what I've recommended here in terms of considering and weighing these various options if you're a bootstrap SaaS founder? Well, first and foremost, I would focus probably primarily in the B2C or the B2B space. I would not consider pretty much anything else at this point. And even between the B2C and the B2B space, I'd highly recommend you focus your efforts in the B2B space. That is going to reduce the number of combinations you need to manage, and it's also going to reduce the amount of challenges that you're likely to experience along the way. Plus, you can get to positive cash flow, positive revenue sooner rather than later, especially these days based on what AI is capable and how quickly we can bring these products to market once you find that ultimate problem or solving for the business that you want to build your solution around. And you're not going to have to worry about the challenges for building one of those other type businesses like a marketplace or a social media application. And if you got value out of this content, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment. That helps me learn more about how I can make the content better for you.